Welcome right back. On this session, we are going to be learning how to deploy an application to our EKS cluster that we created in the previous video. Please, if you don't know how to create an EKS cluster, go to the previous video that we did on creating an EKS cluster. We had very simple steps. We created an EKS cluster with 2 nodes. So let's verify if we have our 2 nodes. Yes, we have 2 nodes running on our EKS cluster. Now we want to deploy an application on our EKS cluster. I'm using an IDE, so it's going to auto-populate for me. If you don't have, please install VS Code. I will highly recommend VS Code. So we're creating a pod, and you see it auto-populates here. If you want to create a pod, Kubernetes pod, yes, I want to create a pod using this configuration. So you see, it makes it very easier for me. And the name of the pod I want to create, I'll call it Hilltop app. Name is equals to Hilltop. And the container is, we have a Node.js application running. And for the image, I have an image in our Docker public repository. So you can use the same image as well. It's a simple Node.js application that we built. And for resources, we don't want to specify the resource block for now. And for container pod, the container runs on port 8080. So you can configure that as well on your end. And so with this configuration, we are going to create our pod and find out if the pod is running. So the pod should be created. So if I run the command kubectl get pods, so the pod is running in the default namespace. So our Hilltop app is running in the default namespace. Now what we want to do next is to expose this pod, okay? We want to create a service to expose this pod so that we can access this pod from out of the cluster. So if I start typing service, it auto-populates for me Kubernetes service. So this is a service to expose this pod. No, this is rather secret, not service. Okay, Kubernetes service. Yes, this is what we expect. So for Kubernetes service, we want to create a service to expose our application. And the name of the service, we can call it Hilltop service. SVC or Hilltop service, okay? And now, what is the type of service we are creating? So for type, we are going to create a service of type node pod, okay? This is a type of service we are creating. It's a node pod type of service because we're exposing our application using a pod on our EC2 instance. And the selector field, you must make sure the selector field matches the label of your pod. So I copy the selector field, the label on my pod, and I replace this with what is in the selector. So name is equals to Hilltop, and name on the label is mapped to Hilltop. And for the pod, we are exposing this service itself on port 80. And target pod, the target port here is the target port of our container. And here we said our container runs on port 8080. So target port here as well should be port 8080. And now after target port, you need to specify node port. What port on your EC2 instance are you opening for this application? Node port like this. And for the node port, we can open a port like it has a port range, I think 30,000 to 30,000 to 32,000 something. So we can open for 30,000 and let's say give a random number 32. Okay, for 30,000 and 32. So we expect this service to be created and to expose our application. So I copy this configuration as well. So the service has been created. So kubectl get port. You see our port is running. You can lock the port. kubectl locks hilltop. You see example app listening on port 8080. So these are the logs. We are getting logs from the port. Let's see the IP address of this port. kubectl describe port hilltop. This is the description of our port hilltop. You see it has a label on it, name, map to hilltop. And this is the IP address of the port ending with 191. So this is the IP address of the port running. And let's see on what node is this port running. You can also see that here. The scheduler scheduled the node down here on events. He scheduled the node on the node with IP ending with 188. Okay, with the IP address ending with 188. You can do kubectl get port -oy. So it gives you the IP address of the port. This is the IP address of the hilltop port, and this is the IP address of the node that this port was assigned to by the scheduler. So if we want to access this port, if you run the command kubectl get endpoint, you realize that the hilltop service has an endpoint, which is the IP address of the port running on port 8080. Okay, so if you do kubectl get svc for service, you see we have the hilltop service running. Remember, we said our port ends with 191. So let's see if this service was really able to expose this port. Do kubectl describe svc hilltop svc. If you look at the description of the service, you look at the endpoint. Look at this IP address 172.31.7.191. This is the IP address of our port, and the port runs on port 8080. The container in this port runs on port 8080, and the node port to which this application is exposed is on port 3002. So what then do we need to do to check if we can access this application? To see if we can access this application on our browser, what we need is the public IP address of this node, which ends with 188, and this node port 30,032. So we go back to our console. In our console, we are looking for the node that ends with, we go to EC2 instances. These are our running EC2 instances, and we are looking for the EC2 instance that is hosting our pod. Back on our cluster, we see the EC2 instance was the one with the node on US West 1, okay? US West 2, let's see. We don't seem to see that. Let me see. So we've created our node, and we've created our cluster, and we have a pod and a service running. So kubectl get nodes. So we have our nodes running in US West 1, which is where we created our Kubernetes cluster. kubectl get pods -oy. So we have this pod running on this node that ends with, whose private IP ends with 188. So kubectl get svc. So the node port that we expose is service of type node port. The node port is on 30,032. So we're going to look for the private IP address of this node that ends with 188. So we go back to our EC2 instance and we go to the EC2 console. So on our EC2 console, we must make sure we're in the region US West 1. And we are looking for the node that has the private IP ending with 188. And we confirm our region here is US West 1. So we are in US West 1, and we're looking with the node that has the private IP ending with 188. So this is our node. So we copy the public IP address and we paste on the page on our browser, and we map it to 32,002, and we hit enter. Now we don't get a reply from our application. It will continuously be in a loop. Why? The reason is because this EC2 instance has a security group. If you come to security on that EC2 instance, you're going to see a security group that has an inbound rule. It has an inbound rules that allows all traffic. And if you look at the source, the source is from itself. Okay, look at the name of the security group. It ends with 47 and the source is 47. So it allows all traffic within itself and not any external traffic. So we want to add a custom port that allows traffic from port 30,032. So this is the port of our application coming from everywhere. Okay, so we accept this rule because we're exposing this application to end users, and then we try to refresh. Now you see we can access our application. Docker Learning with Hilltop Consultancy. Are you ready to learn Docker architecture? Get info. Okay, so these are the information about our page, a custom application we have built. So please, if you want to see how to create more resources on Kubernetes, we're going to be creating deployment, we're going to be creating stateful sets, we're going to be creating daemon sets, we're going to look at services, config maps, we're going to look at secrets, we're going to look at persistent volumes and volume claims, and also cluster architecture. So feel free to like, comment, share, and also you can make a request if there is something specific you're struggling with, and I'll be more than glad to do the next video for you. So thank you very much for this session.